Almost half of the people who decide to become time travelers only do so out of regret. I suppose I can understand the nature of this motivation. No one is perfect, least of all myself. Perfect is one of those words invented to represent something that doesn't exist. It's like brontosaurus, or galaxy, or moment, or shovel, or pemp slider. Any which way and how, life can only exist in points of subjective progression, but life does so very rarely run along smooth lines. Human beings make mistakes, miscalculations, bad decisions, boiled turnip casseroles. Anyone who has ever sat through a relative's holiday slideshow wishes that they could have had the last 3 hours of their life back. Hindsight gives clearer vision than even the most advanced pair of hyperoptic spectacles. People with these nagging regrets believe that they can rewrite their past mistakes with the aid of a time machine. And again, I can understand the allure of the promise of a second chance. But these people just don't understand the nature of time. In truth, most people don't understand the nature of time. There are more theories than theorists, I sometimes think. The point is that those lamenting for their past actions think that it's a simple matter of traveling back in time and rewriting history with as much ease as one ties their own shoes or changes a light bulb. What they don't realize is that the timelines of which the chronosphere is comprised are countless. The number of timelines with independently relative causality are minuscule. Therefore, the number of possible alterations to previously established events are equally minuscule. You interrupt one wedding in 1835,
I object.
and 300 years later, the human race is subjugated by a race of giant subterranean crabs. That's called a causality sequence. And they're all over the place. And they're not even the worst. An even greater hindrance to altering the past is something called a paradox loop. Many years ago, I vomited on Pauline Bonaparte. In hindsight, I would have done best to avoid those miniature prawn quiches, but I couldn't go back and change that even if I wanted to. And I want to. It's hard to explain. Let's say that you're sitting in a restaurant at 3 o'clock having a spot of lunch. All of a sudden, a bite of your pork chop gets lodged in your throat and you begin to choke. The waiter rushes over and slaps you firmly on the back, dislodging the bit of food and sending it flying across the room, landing in a lady's foie gras. The lady is quite startled and screams, startling another waiter carrying a trifle behind her. The waiter trips, the trifle flies from his hands and out of an open window, splattering all over the windscreen of a passing steam carriage. The carriage veers out of control and crashes into a nearby electro-transmission tower, which topples over and smashes a water tank on the opposite side of the street. The water spills everywhere, and the transmission tower electrifies it. Just then, a passing demolition automaton walks through the water, and the electricity from the tower overloads its engine, causing it to rampage from malfunction. It smashes street lamps, crushes buildings, and wouldn't you know it, in the midst of the chaos, the machine trods on your parked steam carriage, which you cannot afford to repair. If only you had ordered the soup. Now, let's say that you have access to a time machine. You would think that it would only take a short trip back in time to 3 o'clock for you to convince yourself to order the soup instead, and subsequently avoid a great deal of chaos and a very large repair fee. Well, you would think wrongly. If you were to travel back in time to prevent the pork-chop-based chain of destruction, what reason would you have to make your transtemporal journey in the first place? There will have been no catastrophe. therefore no purpose to travel back in time. So there would be subsequently no trans-temporal journey to prevent said catastrophe, because said catastrophe will have never occurred. But because there would have never been a trans-temporal journey, there would have been nothing to prevent said catastrophe from occurring in the first place. Hence, you would have created a paradox. Two contradicting event progressions occupying the same timeline. The chronosphere does not abide by paradoxes. The consequences of creating a paradox loop are not pleasant. In essence, if you wish to change history, you will have no need to. It's really not worth bothering at all.